Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is Erin from Senator Reed's office. We're here to celebrate Women's History Month, and with that, I'm going to introduce Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Erin, and welcome to our 2022 Women's History Month Roundtable. And I'd like to thank Kelly Nevins and the Women's Fund of Rhode Island for their continued partnership in co-hosting this event and for their steadfast commitment to equality, lifting up women's voices, and supporting the next generation of Rhode Island women leaders. I'd also like to thank our moderator, Sandra Victorino, and today's panelists, Liz Hankey, Wendy Chacoin, and Lisa St Germain for sharing their time and expertise with us. This year's theme gets to the core of what we have experienced over the past 2 years. It is women providing healing, promoting hope. Throughout history, women have shouldered the lion's share of responsibility, protecting the basic health and well-being for families and communities. It is this work of providing care where it is needed for the young, the elderly, the sick, and those with disabilities that makes all other work possible. It is the foundation that our economy and our daily lives rely upon. Yet, as a society, we take it for granted. The pandemic has shown us the danger of neglecting the care economy. Our healthcare workers, childcare providers, and home-based care professionals have continued to serve despite the health risks to themselves and their families, despite the long hours and low pay, and despite their own challenges with childcare and schooling during this pandemic. But this situation is not sustainable. The time to invest in the care professions and the dedicated people who choose them is now. Early this week, I had the opportunity to meet with a young woman who's the first in her family to go to college and who wants a career in human services. In addition to her studies, she works 2 jobs. One as a case manager, supporting individuals with developmental disabilities, and another as a banquet server. She is also a mother of 2. She is under constant pressure to make ends meet. It should not be this hard for someone to pursue a career in the care professions. We must do better for her and so many others. That is why we're here today. It's time to get serious about how we can take better care of our care workforce. With that, I'd like to turn the program over to Kelly Nevins, who has been a leading advocate on this and many other issues. Kelly, please.
Thank you for your kind words, Senator Reed. Yes, it is our pleasure at the Women's Fund to have been partnering with Senator Reed and his staff for many years on a National Women's History Month program. And so pleased to bring it back again this year, and very much hope that next year we'll be able to bring these back in person as well.
Yes.
Senator Reed's comments, of course, really highlight what we're going to be talking about today. You know, certainly women have played a historical role in caregiving, both paid and unpaid. And the American sector devoted to healthcare is valued at $646 billion, which is, I found this out a couple of weeks ago, is actually larger than the pharmaceutical industry. And yet, professionalization of the industry adds requirements for folks to get degrees. And even while the majority of workers in this field are predominantly women, they get these higher degrees and yet they're still underpaid. As Senator Reed pointed out, you know, for a woman who wants to work in this sector, it can be very difficult to ensure that they have enough resources to keep a roof over their head, to pay for childcare, to pay for food, et cetera, et cetera. Care work is indispensable and it's invaluable, and yet most individual caregivers have historically been criminally underpaid, and they are overwhelmingly women and people of color. And so today's session is really going to explore some of those issues and really opportunities to change that dynamic. You know, hopefully we get to a point where we're talking about living wages for everyone. We're talking about perhaps being able to waive degree costs for folks who pursue a career in this industry. And we also need to be thinking about the mental health of those who are experiencing an exhaustion gap because of the work that they are doing in this industry, in addition to perhaps double and triple shifts that they're spending at home dealing with their own family care issues. It is my pleasure to turn this program over today to one of Women's Fund of Rhode Island's board members, Sandra Victorino. She is also the Director of Workforce Development, Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations at Care New England. She's worked in the behavioral health field for 16 years, and her areas of interest in healthcare include access for all populations, health and mental health equity, and culturally and linguistically appropriate health services. We couldn't think of a better person to manage today's panel discussion. Sandra is going to introduce the rest of our speakers, and I would invite those of you who have questions to please use the Q&A button that you can find at the bottom of your screen. And as we have time, we'll be able to have Sandra post those questions to our participants as well. Thank you so much. Sandra, the game is yours.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Senator Reed. It's a pleasure to be here today. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. So Wendy Chicoine is the Associate Vice President of Clinical Operations and Education at Providence Community Health Center. She joined PCHC in January 2013 as a float clinic nurse at the Olneyville Health Center. She was first drawn to community health nursing following a clinical rotation at Head Start while enrolled in the RN to BSN program at Rhode Island College. And next we have Lisa St Germain. She is a licensed mental health clinician, a social service clinician at Butler Hospital, and a member of SEIU 1199. SEIU represents over 29,000 healthcare workers in Connecticut and Rhode Island who are united to improve the lives of those they care for every day. And next we have Lisa Henke. Lisa. I apologize. Lisa, can you introduce yourself for me? I apologize.
Are you talking Liz? Hanky?
Liz. Sorry, Liz.
That's okay. I am the workforce director at Genesis Center. Genesis is an adult education facility in Providence, and we have a variety of job trainings, specifically in the healthcare field, and I oversee those job training programs, and I've been here for 10 years now.
Thank you so much, Liz. I appreciate my screen ended up doing something funny, of course. So the first question I have for our panelists today is, how has COVID impacted the industry and where are the biggest stressors being felt? Please feel free to jump in as you see fit as we're having this conversation.
If it's okay, I'll go first.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. As being a member of the panel, I'm truly honored. I'm a licensed mental health clinician in the state of Rhode Island, but I'm also a social service clinician at Butler Hospital. I also have a small private psychotherapy practice. And I can say that COVID has impacted our industry in which is mental health and substance abuse in just every imaginable way. The increased demand for services in mental health and substance abuse treatment, the access to services, the staffing crisis that we're in with this increased demand and just not enough staff to accommodate what's being needed. You know, we've had to really be flexible and creative in ways that we never imagined we would have to. Here at Butler, we opened a conference center where we treated patients as an inpatient unit. We've opened COVID units within intensive treatment units to meet the needs of the community that we serve. As well as taking care of our patients, it's also taking care of yourself personally. And a lot of us women working in mental health, work in hospitals, you know, we come to the hospital. How do we get here safely? How do we do our job safely? And how do we not take this home to our families? You know, the caregiving doesn't end in the workday, in my opinion. When we go home, a lot of people have children to take care of, elderly parents to take care of. You know, and how do you keep yourself safe and not succumb to the pressure of it all, really?
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing.
This is Wendy. Thank you so much for, again, having me here. You know, I just want to kind of piggyback onto, you know, some of what Lisa was talking about, even just thinking about nurses and, you know, other healthcare professionals as well that were on the front line. And I think that, you know, we responded to this unprecedented public health crisis in the very beginning of the pandemic. You know, I think many nurses had to work in unfamiliar environments, which required new clinical, you know, knowledge and skills, and having to keep up with the frequent changes and guidelines. And again, just that concern of bringing home COVID to their families and having all that stress and pressure to try to ensure that we were, you know, keeping up with the most up-to-date information and keeping ourselves and our patients safe. You know, and I think that, you know, many were concerned, as I mentioned, with contracting it to their families, but we had our own concerns and fears, but also trying to reassure and inform and support, you know, the people of our communities who were also very frightened and worried. And I think that, you know, having that responsibility of caring for individuals during a time when there was so much that was unknown, that now, you know, we're kind of 2 years, you know, into the pandemic, and, you know, nurses as well as other healthcare workers are experiencing that burnout, you know, that moral distress, you know, passion fatigue, depression, and anxiety. And, you know, a lot of our older nurses, our experienced nurses have decided to retire. So we've kind of lost that as a resource. And I think that contributes to staffing shortages and, you know, contributing to high turnover, I would say, especially in the nursing community.
Thank you, Wendy.
And I was thinking of this in terms of, because we're mostly an educational institution. So when the pandemic first happened, we had to pivot very quickly to doing everything online, which was quite challenging. And so, but we've, you know, figured out how to move our classes online as much as possible. And we're training, so for example, nursing assistants, and we had all these people who want to be nursing assistants, and they're entering that field at a time that is unlike anything in the past, not knowing what to expect. And we did have a lot of people that dropped out of fear, you know, the unknown and things like that. And we even had some issues with, once the vaccines became available, we had students in those programs who did not want to take the vaccine. They weren't comfortable with it. And so that was those were all challenges from a training perspective as well.
You know, all three of you mentioned just kind of like this exit in different ways. What are things that are being done to address some of these stressors within your sectors? On how, you know, is there Lisa, you talked about how we took care of patient care and addressed those stressors, but how are some of these other stressors being handled within each of your sectors?
Oh, as a mental health counselor, I think that I could throw out about 1 million different ways to cope, and relaxation strategies and all those types of things. But when you're actually in it and you're coming to work every day during this pandemic, it's so hard to put these things into practice. I think one of the things that I've tried to practice is that at least to give myself several opportunities throughout the day to just unplug. Because if you remember when we first started, you'd like get in the car to drive, because we were never able to go remote. We always had to come to work. So you'd get in the car to come to work, and all you would hear about was the pandemic and the number of deaths on that particular day. And then you'd gown up and you'd throw on your N95 and you'd be meeting with patients, trying to reassure them, trying to reassure their families that, you know, we're doing the best that we can in these, you know, unforeseen circumstances. And then you get back in the car and it's all about the pandemic again, and there was like no escape. And I think one of the things that I tried to do was just try to like unplug, and instead of listening to the radio, I started to listen to audiobooks and just like making like these small life changes to just not be so immersed in it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to turn it off. It definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree, Lisa. I mean, for myself as well, I think, again, I think there's this trying to find that balance of making sure you're informed, right? And that you have as much information as possible within your role as a leader to make sure that the information gets passed down to the staff and anybody that really needs to know that. But in doing that, I think we became oversaturated. And again, it's just that, how do you turn that off and just disconnect? So myself included, I actually made a point to not watch the news because of that very reason. You're just so inundated, throughout the day. And again, so many frequent changes and trying to keep up. And then, that is stressful in itself, but then also having to hear the sadness, right, that was going on and the grief that was going on throughout the country and actually globally. So yeah, definitely agree.
I was thinking about one of the things that has been that I've been seeing happening to sort of mitigate the staffing shortages and stuff is across the board in all of the training programs, salaries have gone up dramatically. I mean, percentages that would never have happened prior to the pandemic, which I guess is one of the only silver linings. So that's an attempt to get people into these jobs. It's been offering higher salaries and signing bonuses and all, which is great. Of course, the cost of living is also going up at the same time, and none of that mitigates the stress that you're talking about. And some people, even when they're able to make more money, they still don't have childcare. There's still issues with transportation. And some people just feel like it's not worth it. And I'm sure you all see that. Like some people are just like, it's not worth it. I don't care how much you pay me. I'm not putting myself or my family at that kind of risk. Or I can't do this job under these circumstances without the childcare and things like that. So, but I have seen, go ahead.
If I could just respond to what Liz is saying.
Yes.
I totally agree with what you just had to say. And, I'm fortunate that I work, I'm a delegate with 1199 and we have a strong union and they advocate, that we have, they negotiate, I'm sorry, that we have like strong benefits. But I think you're right. Like having come to work under these pressures, under these circumstances, it's very hard with like the rate of pay and, having to coordinate childcare and that type of thing. I just wanted to agree with what you were saying.
Thank you so much,
And the
Lisa.
inflation rate as well. Like who could have predicted that?
Yeah. And so I guess, with that being said, it makes it very difficult to attract people to come in to the industry. But if and when people do come in, the few the passionate and the ones that have stayed with us, how do you help the new workers in the industry navigate the job learning curve and the balance of emotional demands on themselves? Like what is something that you do to be able to help in that direction?
I can speak a little bit to that. I mean, I think, again, in relation to the nursing workforce, I think it's important that organizations support that transition, from student to professional nurse. New nurses, that are joining the healthcare industry, they're doing that in a very stressful and challenging time. I was that new nurse, and I remember what that was like. Just take the pandemic out of that, and then you add those additional pieces. It is challenging, and I think just ensuring that the new hires have a really comprehensive orientation and providing those frequent check-ins to just assess how they're transitioning into their new role, especially in this environment, because we are still working through this pandemic. And then just recognizing, especially for nursing students, their clinical experiences were interrupted by the pandemic. And so we need to be mindful of those new nurses who are entering practice and, taking into consideration and recognize that they may have varied clinical experiences. And then also just, I think, taking that time and space to create support groups and identify, stressful and complicated situations, that they have a space to be able to decompress and talk about those things and how to work through them, and just developing some additional goals for them that are not just focused on clinical aspects of their role, but also just how to self-care, how to self-advocate for themselves, and having a mentor, that they can continuously rely upon. I just think that, these are really important to provide new, health, even just others in healthcare that are going transitioning into their role. But we want them to be successful. We want them to stay in the profession and continue on for many years. So I think, implementing some of those types of strategies would be very helpful.
Sort of piggybacking off of what Wendy had to say, I agree that like a lot of the student internship programs were interrupted during this pandemic. We had students on the unit, nursing, social work, occupational therapy, that would, they'd be active participants in the treatment teams on the unit who were, they had to like abruptly leave because of the pandemic. And to some extent, they're being worked back into the curriculum. But I do say here at Butler, we do have a strong peer mentorship program where we provide support, education to one another, check in with each other frequently, see what each other's needs are. In addition, we have a training fund that we use to help our new hires as well as experienced staff gain, education and support that they need.
Yeah.
Great. So,
And I would agree, Lisa, like, at private community health centers, we have a very comprehensive training and preceptorship. And I think that's very important, just to ensure that the staff, especially new staff, and not even just, new nurses, but new staff to, let's say, the community health center environment, have that support to feel successful.
Liz, I'm interested in hearing, you have an interesting role, right? They're students and then they're going into their internship. In that perspective, as far as student to then professional, how do you all support, or how the students navigate that?
So, we do try to prepare them for not only the specific tasks that they'll do in their job as a medical assistant or a CNA or whatever, but also just what it takes to be a professional in the workplace. And we do have a lot of students who have not really had any professional jobs before. And so we do spend a lot of time on that kind of thing. And now we do have to talk about some of those realities since the pandemic and things like that. So we do try to prepare people as well as we can. And we let them know that we're available for them after they finish the program. And we do have people who come back to see us and talk to us, sometimes months and even years later, which is amazing. But we also do have people, there are people that we just sort of lose touch with, which is unfortunate. We'd like to stay in touch with everybody. But they get into their job and get really deeply involved in that culture and that community, and that's fine. But we do want our students to know that we're still here for them always, after they leave.
Thank you. So I guess one of the things that I would like to ask a little further is, peer mentorship, like how successful have you seen that? And, or mentorship just in general, like within this workforce, within this field. Because you guys you touched into it, but if you could just speak a little bit more about it, if possible, either through your own experience or, that you've seen the new workforce coming through.
Sure. So I think a lot of it takes place in the context of preceptorship, like we were talking about earlier. So in social work, oftentimes we'll be assigned like a new social worker who will like sit with us, and we'll do a lot of like one-on-one work initially. This is how I do things. We might not move them off, but like that person might switch around to other social workers because everybody has a different style, a different way that they go about doing their work. In nursing, they do preceptorships and just like how each individual unit works, because each unit has its own culture. Occupational therapy is very similar to that as well. We all sit together as a cohesive team in the morning, talk about, each patient that we have on the unit, what those specific needs are for this particular patient, and how we might best meet them.
Thank you, Lisa. And
Yeah,
then-
I mean,
Go ahead, Wendy.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, Lisa, I would agree. I think, in primary care, we do similar things, right? We have new nurses that, work with a nurse in our health center. Same thing with our medical assistants, just to ensure that they have the appropriate amount of time. Similar to, what you talked about, care teams sit and they all discuss what the patient's needs are. And I think that's important, right? Just kind of having that communication, and it allows the staff members to communicate where they need further guidance at that point in time. So yeah, I think that's very beneficial, and I do think that it works very well.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking from the perspective of our students going into internships. I can't stress enough how important it is when they have someone who's there and supportive and leading them. And just today we had a little graduation for our last medical assistant class. And one of the students was saying when she first started her internship, she was terrified and overwhelmed and everything. And she ended up loving it and taking a position there because they were so nice and supportive, and nobody made her feel like she was stupid because she didn't really know. And so, I mean, that you can't overestimate the importance of having people who are experienced take you under their wing and not be just critical and judgmental, but trying to help you out, and also pointing out where you're making mistakes, not just saying, oh, you're doing everything great, it's all perfect. So it's very important.
Yeah,
And
go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah. I think that support is so important. I can just speak from my own personal experience. I had a fantastic mentor preceptor when I was a new nurse, and I think that made all the difference. It builds confidence, and I think as you mentioned, it's not just the things you're doing right, but also being able to constructively give feedback on where your areas of improvement are. And I think when you have that trust and that level of comfort with that individual, I think that just gives you more confidence as a new nurse, or even anybody new in healthcare. It just makes it better, and we want to learn more when we know that we're not afraid to ask questions, or because we know we're fully supported.
Yeah, the sounding board is extremely important whenever you're in those roles. And so I'm happy to hear, it was part of my own experience is what made me the professional I am today, was either peer mentorship or, good mentors that ended up helping me through. I think it's so critical in healthcare. And as we saw over the past, 2.5 years of what it has been able to provide, that team modality. What's something exciting that's on the horizon related to this topic that you all are just thrilled about within the field?
Well, for me, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I think it's pretty exciting that the state of Rhode Island is trying to accelerate access, allowing people to be able to work with in the mental health substance abuse field by creating a 2-tier mental health licensure, so that you might get out of college, be able to take a licensing exam, work under somebody's supervision, and then take another licensing exam in order to work independently in the community, very similar to the LICSW. And I think that would be a tremendous benefit to the community. Just having that access to care. I can't tell you how often I receive phone calls of people like, I need a mental health counselor. Do you have any openings? I need therapy. Do you have any openings? And there's just no availability at this current time. So that's pretty exciting for me.
Yes, it's super critical. it's just, you know, being a mental health therapist myself, I totally understand, Lisa. There is a dire need, and I think our state is having conversations, a lot more conversations, and I think the pandemic allowed people to start having conversations about behavioral health and the needs around that profession. Wendy, Liz? Is there anything that's coming up on the horizon for your sectors that you're thrilled about?
I don't know if I would say, I'm not sure if there's anything I'm specifically aware of, but I do see at the level of people of the, you know, organizations that fund our programs, that the grant funders, that there is a recognition of the need for continuing training. So, you know, most of our students have a high school credential and then they get some sort of certification, but in order for them to keep moving forward, there's usually a need for additional training. And I feel like there's starting to be more recognition of that and more support for that at the funding level and in other places too. So a lot of our students, I mean, some of them will go and become a medical assistant and be a medical assistant for 20 years. That's fine. But then there are other people who may say, you know, I think I want to go into, you know, nursing school or PA school or whatever. And actually, a lot of the advanced programs are requiring their students, like CCRI nursing program requires them to be a CNA first. And I know for a lot of PA, like physician's assistant programs, they require them to be either a nursing assistant or a medical assistant or something before they can even apply. So I think that's good to see that there's there's pathways and that they're being supported.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, what's one thing that our audience can do to address anything that's discussed today? You are also, you know, panelists and there's an audience, and I think there are a lot of people within our community that are interested in helping if they can help. And so what is one thing that you could ask them to address if there's anything?
I don't know. I think, you know, to be aware that, you know, we're very dedicated to what we do and we really are trying to make a difference. And sometimes to our own mental health, you know, not to the detriment of our own mental health, but like it affects our mental health as well. And to just sort of be aware of, you know, what the work that we're trying to do and that we are trying to meet the demands of the community, and, you know, any funding that can be sent that way is always appreciated.
Yes.
I mean, I would say, you know, just being more knowledgeable, I think, and recognizing the signs and symptoms of burnout, I think for many individuals in healthcare. I think, you know, I speak a lot to nursing because that's kind of my area. But I think just having that knowledge and I think educating ourselves and just being aware. I think, you know, healthcare workers were kind of looked at as the heroes, and, you know, and just there was a huge spotlight on us, I think, in general in the very beginning of the pandemic, and that kind of died down a little bit. And I do think that that's still that work is still happening today, but I think just to recognize that the healthcare workers, although the pandemic, you know, is kind of somewhat changed, people are still working, you know, really hard, and they are still there is still that burnout that's there, and just recognizing that for the healthcare workers.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, both of you made an excellent point of, you know, being more knowledgeable. It's really, really critical. The healthcare is a unique profession, and many of us go in because it's a passion of ours, and it drives us, and it takes a lot from us. And I don't think people always recognize because we're on and we do and we move, and you have to move quickly within healthcare, strategically and quickly. Liz, you know, doing the workforce development behind it, it can take a toll on what we do every single day. And I know, Lisa, you touched base a little bit on the self-care, and so did you, Wendy, that you decide to do when caring for yourself and being in this field. Is there anything else that you would say, or Liz, that you would like to say about what you do for self-care? So what I do for self-care is every year I try something new. I learned how to swim one year. I ran a marathon one year. I'm learning how to play the drums this year. Anything that takes my mind completely out of the space that I'm in. And, you know, I think we don't often talk about that enough. And I think, you know, just how do we care for ourselves in a way that allows us to continue to do the work that we do every day?
Yeah, so I mean,
That's a great, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Liz.
I love that you're learning the drums. My daughter is a drummer, so I have a thing I like female drummers. But I have a dog, and I feel, you know, I love dogs, and I take my dog for walks in Roger Williams Park, and that's probably the thing that gives me the most sort of relaxation and ability to sort of walk away from stress and everything. So that's fresh air, exercise, and spending time with my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, I mean, I will admit that I have not been the best at self-care. 100%. I think it took me up until probably a couple of months ago to realize that, you know, wait a minute, I need to, you know, start putting up some, you know, just kind of giving myself, you know, that space, right? Just I wasn't doing that, and just recognizing what burnout looked like for myself. And as I mentioned, you know, for what can others do to kind of be aware of this sort of thing. And I mentioned just being knowledgeable around it, but I also think we don't recognize it in ourselves. And I definitely was one of those individuals. So I've actually, you know, just trying to better my work-life balance, prioritizing my own health and well-being. It's also essential for me to meet my professional obligations. So, you know, what I've recently started doing is just taking a walk at lunchtime with colleagues, making better food choices, you know, finding things that I was passionate about prior to this, and just trying to refocus kind of my energy and putting some effort into some of the things that I love to do, and just saying it's okay to have boundaries for ourselves. I think that's the word I was looking for. I wasn't able to articulate that a second ago, but that's it. I think identifying what those boundaries are, and it's okay. And I think women in general tend to feel guilty, and I'm not sure if I'm the only one that feels that way, because a healthcare worker and a nurse, we tend to feel guilty about taking that time for ourselves. And, you know, I was speaking with one of my mentors. We talked about mentorship. I have several nursing mentors, and we were just talking about nurse burnout, and said something to me, you know, that kind of resonated. You know, she said, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. And that is so true. I mean, we can't give to others if we're not taking care of ourselves. And I personally had to just kind of pause and recognize that I was not practicing what I would preach to my patients, or the advice I would give to my patients. So I think that's something that I've taken away, and just really becoming more aware and implementing those self-care activities for myself.
Absolutely. I have a friend that says I need to celebrate myself a lot more. So every once in a while I figure out how I'm going to celebrate myself, right? Because it's important for us to acknowledge our wins. And I think there have been many, but we're not the best as females, and that do that work. I don't think that we're used to putting out and giving, that we sometimes aren't as willing to receive or asking to receive. Lisa, is there anything else that you want to add for your self-care routine?
No, I can totally relate to everything that Wendy had to say.
Erin, I want to check in to make sure that if we have any Q&A, since I'm not as familiar with WebEx.
No, we don't right now. Thank you so much, Sandra. And I don't know if Senator Reed, if you wanted to comment on what you've listened to so far and some of your thoughts.
Well, thanks, Aaron. First, let me thank you all. This has been extraordinarily insightful. And also, I want to thank you for not just the dedication, because the last few years called for more than dedication, it called for courage. And all of you and your colleagues displayed that and inspired us and kept us going when we felt sorry for ourselves. We said, wait a second, I'm not in a medical facility working overtime, facing much more proximity to the disease than anyone else. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Just a quick, a few points here is that my daughter is learning the drums. I hope, Liz and Sandra, that you have electric drums. Because when I was first told, I had no role and decision by my wife, I said, oh God, I mean, that's, we live in a small little neighborhood. And then she said electric drums, and I'm old, so I didn't know what she meant. But as you know, they're simulated drums and headphones, so the only noise is the drummer. So practical advice, but it's nice to know we have something in common. Daughters and drumming women. On the national level, we've been trying to address many of the issues that you spoke about. One recent success, and this was legislation that I co-sponsored with Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, is the Dr. Lorner Breen Healthcare Provider Protection Act. And this resulted in the tragic suicide of a young female doctor who just, the stress was unbelievable. She didn't have the opportunity to get it out of her system appropriately. So it's going to provide grants to prepare workers entering the healthcare professions to hopefully prevent suicide, burnout, mental health condition. And also it will establish grants to help people who are in the field already, peer support programming, many of the things you talked about. And so what we want to do, obviously, is work with all of you to ensure that Rhode Island gets its fair share of these grants, which means all we can get, and we'll work hard. But that's one first step. And then the American Rescue Plan, which we passed, provided some resources of healthcare, child care, education. But as you all indicated, we have to have not an episodic approach, but a plan going forward to make child care affordable for everyone. And also, by the way, to make sure the child care workers get adequate reimbursement, that they're not the lowest on the pay scale, et cetera, doing some of the most important work we can ever do, caring for and helping develop children. So I've been joining colleagues to invest in programs like this that will be, I think, helpful to everyone. In fact, it's probably one of the most important things we can do. The other thing we want to do is make sure that we have expanded access to home care and community-based care. One, it's less expensive than being hospitalized or put into a care facility. And two, most people prefer it. They feel more comfortable at home and they want to stay at home. And if we can shift resources there and incentivize that type of work, we're going to be better off, both in terms of the healthcare provisions, but also in terms of our economic issues we face. The president hasn't put many of these ideas in his plan, his Build Back Better plan. We're struggling to get that through. We'll get something through. But I think one of the revelations in this pandemic is the value of daycare, for example, in terms of allowing people to work, the value of our healthcare professions, because without you, it would have been a much, much worse than it was, and it was very bad. And also the fact of preparation. We have to be prepared for the next event because it'll happen. I mean, we live now in a global world. You know, when we were in the 50s or so, when I was a kid, there could be an outbreak of some rare disease in China, but it would never forget it. It wouldn't get to the United States because we just didn't have that kind of globalized traffic and trade, et cetera. And now, you know, these things move around the world very quickly. So we have to be ready. But our best bulwark for these type of problems are you, professionals, dedicated, that'll go above and beyond the call of duty to help people. It's I think it's in your genes, not just in your brain or your job description. So thank you for that. And we're going to work together. I'll work in Washington to see if we get the resources. Then we'll work together to make sure that Rhode Islanders have the resources. But this has been a very revealing and very helpful to me. I thank you all. Keep up the good work. Let all your colleagues know that, you know, they are heroes and they should take a lap, a victory lap. And I was thinking as they were asking the question of how do you sort of self-care? So I'm, you know, in my line of work, you preach what you don't practice. My suggestion would be exercise, because it's great to get out there and you go out with your dog, right? And that's good, et cetera. But that's one thing that's good too. And somebody else mentioned it, just taking moments to, you know, turn everything off, sit down. Maybe there's a book you want to read that has, you know, nothing to do with medical care or economic analysis of medical care. It's just very entertaining. So that's my small contribution to that. But next time, I hope I can report back to you when we do this in person next year that I am preaching what I practice, which is I'm exercising. So that's my goal. Thank you very, very much. Thank you all. You did a great job. So to Liz and to Lisa and to Sandy and Wendy and to Kelly, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Senator
you.
Reed.
Thank you, Senator Reed.
Thank you.
So I'll just quickly wrap up. I too want to echo my thanks to Lisa, to Liz, to Wendy, and to Sandra, our fabulous board member who agreed to do this particular forum. If you are unaware of the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, our mission is to invest in women and girls through research, advocacy, grant making, and strategic partnerships with a goal to achieve gender equity through systemic change. We love to partner on a variety of different programs, and next week I will be appearing on a panel presentation on pandemic impacts on gender equity through the diversity and inclusion professionals network. And we will have information about that event up on our Facebook page. If you follow us on Facebook, you'll be able to hear about upcoming events. If you sign up on our website to receive our emails, you'll also get personalized invitations to enjoy other panel discussions. Misha, who is on this call and helped to plan this particular forum, is working on a new program that we'll be doing in May on mental health. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Again, if you are registered to get our emails, or if you follow us on Facebook, you'll get more information about that as that program is ending, as it's being planned. I also just want to note that next month we will be opening up applications for our Women's Policy Institute, which is a free 9-month training program for women who want to learn about leading grassroots advocacy efforts in Rhode Island. And I'm happy to always talk with you about your ideas, your questions, things that you want to know about the Women's Fund. But our website is at wfri.org. And then just one last thing that I will note is that several of the organizations that are represented by our great speakers this afternoon are part of 401 Gives, which is Rhode Island's Day of Giving, which takes place on April 1st. So if you appreciated the comments, if you appreciated the work of the Genesis Center, the Providence Community Health Center, Butler Hospital, the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, and would love to participate in 401 Gives, I know that all of us would appreciate any support that you can give, particularly because there are lots of matching gifts opportunities that are going to happen on that day. Thank you again to everybody who spent some time with us this afternoon. Have a lovely weekend.
One more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Reed, go ahead.
To also thank Misha and Aaron Akon in our office, because these things don't happen without a lot of hard work by people who do the work. And thank you, ladies.
Yes, I'm sorry, I neglected to thank Aaron and also Moira and Kyle, who were doing work in the background. So thanks to everyone.
Aaron and Moira for several years, so they're very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.